Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our January 2021 Commerce Pulse Report and Grocery Deep Dive, which is, of course, why I was playing Lost in a Supermarket by The Clash. If you are a Spotify subscriber and a Clash fan or are Clash curious, or because you're relatively young, that the Clash are an important band in the history of rock and punk, and you're interested, they have a fantastic documentary, audio documentary on Spotify. It's like 6 or 8 episodes, something like that, narrated by Chuck D from Public Enemy, and it's fantastic. So I recommend that. I know we're all looking for great content. Although we're here to talk about the Commerce Pulse Report and a grocery deep dive. Let me get myself going here on the slides. Here we go. I'm Brian Walker. I'm Chief Strategy Officer here at Bloomreach. I'm joined again today by Ian Burgers. Ian is in the digital marketing team and does a bunch of great research, and he's based in Amsterdam. We'll hear from Ian a little later. I want to share some good news. If you weren't tracking all of our PR and communications and social media, or didn't hear from someone on our organization, just real quick, wanted to share some great news here from Bloomreach, and that is that Exponia, the most loved CDP and marketing automation solution based out of Slovakia, has joined Bloomreach. That acquisition was announced last week. We also announced that Bloomreach raised 150 million, and that's fantastic. It allows us to continue to invest in obviously our products and our customers and so forth. So just wanted to highlight that before we got into Commerce Pulse. I won't belabor it. We'll move on. A little bit about the data that we're going to share today. Again, this is an aggregation of the Bloomreach customer base. At this point, it's across 500 global brands and enterprise businesses selling online. That is increasing now that Exponia is a part of the fold. So we'll be incorporating more data actually into these reports moving forward. And you can read for yourself, and we've talked about it before, the geos and segments that we cover. If you're ever interested in digging in more, or have specific inquiries that you want to make, if you're a journalist or an analyst and so forth, there's an email address there for you. We'll have it at the end as well. Let's get into some headlines. January was a very strong month for online commerce. The Bloomreach customers across both North America, the UK, and Europe. We'll get into some of the details a little later, but really, in my opinion, kind of an interesting surprise how strong it was. We also saw that home furnishings and home improvement had exceptionally good months of January. Coming off the holidays, might be related to gift cards being redeemed and so forth, but really strong coming out of the gates fast in January. Meanwhile, apparel, luxury, solid, but lost some ground relative to the growth in overall online spending. I've got the details there in part because we're not going to have time to go into deeper dives in apparel and luxury segments today. If you're interested in that data, check out our blog post that typically goes up tomorrow or over the weekend. That'll have a lot more detail related to the additional categories we don't get into here. But apparel, as you can see, 26, almost 27% year over year sales growth in January. That's solid. And luxury plus 17.27. There is some interesting data. Again, we don't have time to get into in terms of the changes in conversion and average order size and so forth in those segments. General merchandise was relatively weak, and B2B was very poor. B2B in particular, I think, is really being impacted by the ongoing COVID lockdowns and the impact to the quote unquote offline economy as schools remain closed, as restaurants remain closed, as so many entertainment and sports venues and so forth remain closed. Certainly across our B2B customers, that does have an impact. So while online is, of course, critical, it is having an impact, and it's pretty profound in January. And I think it's just a reflection of what's happening in the macro economy. Let's look a little bit at the North America numbers. Again, very strong year over year traffic and sales gains in January. Traffic up 67.23% and sales up 47.14, excuse me, it should be 41. I apologize, a little typo there. My dyslexia creeping in. That's those are year over year numbers. So that of course is comping versus last January, where we of course had not yet been impacted by the pandemic. But I think what's interesting about that is those are actually ahead of the 2020 trends overall. And of course, the search numbers are very, very strong, and I think indicate some deal shopping. Strong AOS gains, I think, reflect less clearance activity, in part because so many retailers and brands and so forth pared back on inventory and also had a very, very strong holiday season. So there was less to clear out, which meant there was less in clearance sale mode, and average order size held strong, conversion rate very good. So very good month of January for North America. Likewise, UK and Europe, very, very strong, which is interesting because we did see it kind of languish a little bit in the fall and early holiday period. And here coming out of the gates, very strong, plus 38.76% in traffic, plus 37.59% in sales year over year. And I should have mentioned this too on the North America slide. It's of course natural to see a drop versus December, considering that was the holidays, at least the first half of the month, really the holidays. So it's kind of natural to see that. Again, very strong search traffic and sales, AOS slightly down, and conversion rate very strong. So very strong month of January as well. I think post-Brexit and the ongoing lockdowns certainly had an impact here. And then maybe, some resolution on Brexit kind of negotiations had a positive impact on the UK market, and consumers starting to spend a little bit more now that some of the uncertainty is removed. And then unfortunately, ongoing lockdowns in the UK and in Europe, of course, forcing people to use online channels, even if normally, they live in a city or a village where they might easily pop down to the local store. But anyway, very strong January for UK and Europe. Little bit of a deep dive into home furnishings, big jump in year over year traffic. That's just remarkable. 167.1% and sales up 51%. Dramatic conversion rate drop and search sales indicate to me that people were in there looking again for very specific things, probably the same things that we've been looking for some time, as people look to upgrade kitchens and upgrade home furniture. And I think that also gift cards probably had an impact. But it is really interesting to see such strong traffic gains, strong sales gains, but dramatic drop in conversion rate. And that tells me that people were disappointed not to find the products they were specifically looking for, like desks, right? And so forth in these categories. So very interesting to watch. In home improvement and DIY, wow, again, another exceptionally strong January. Traffic up 69%, but sales year over year up 154.12% and very strong relative to December. You can see average order size down a bit. I think that we've seen that kind of persist because of the renewed popularity or new popularity of curbside pickup and so forth. People don't need to meet minimums, and they're not concerned so much about shipping and so forth, getting it higher. So they're buying smaller dollar value carts without hesitation. That drives AOS down a little bit, but look at the conversion rate, just remarkable. I do think gift cards and other things here drove it. Certainly, I don't expect a lot of people are doing home and garden projects in January. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just a Seattle bias, but nonetheless, really interesting to see. Very, very strong month of January. Okay, now we're going to do a deep dive into grocery and New Year's health trends, and kind of examine this major story. Of course, it's been playing out throughout 2020 and into this year, and evaluate, what we can learn and what we can expect in this segment in particular. And of course, even if you don't serve the grocery market yourself, no doubt you're a consumer, so it might be still very interesting for you to look at. First thing to mention here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is U.S. data. These charts are from McKinsey, so thank you to them for publishing such great research that we can use to help illustrate the story. First thing to mention is that our number of our shopping frequency for groceries has really declined. So we're more likely to do larger shopping less frequently. We're not going to run to the store real quick. We're not going to pop down to the corner bodega or corner shop. We're probably buying in larger quantities and having it delivered or there for curbside pickup. And so our shopping frequency has dropped dramatically. And the number of stores we're shopping in, of course, has dropped dramatically as well. The pandemic also really drove a switch to store brands, partly because of what was available. A lot of grocery stores also, reduced the variety available on their shelves intentionally. Even CPG companies and so forth also reduced the number of flavors and SKUs and package sizes and other things, really to make sure that the supply chain could hold up. But many consumers also shopped at a new store and changed their primary store. They also see that the intent to continue is quite high. So, this doesn't address specifically things like curbside pickup or delivery, but we also will expect that as well. Switching over to the EU, I think it's interesting to see the satisfaction levels with sort of grocers in terms of in-store pickup and delivery and so forth. And Ian, I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, being based in Amsterdam and observing what's happening here, what are some of the things that jump out at you here?
Thanks, Brian. Well, I think what's really interesting to see in Europe is that the countries with a more advanced online grocery market were really better suited to handle the shift to online grocery shopping. And it really becomes clear in this McKinsey chart on the right, where we can see that the UK has one of the most developed online grocery markets. And so pre-pandemic, they already really had the infrastructure in place to meet this new shift in consumer demand. And we can see that in the UK, the most people were really satisfied with their online shopping, and they think they will continue to buy groceries online. While in countries like in Italy and Germany, the grocery market wasn't that developed yet, and you can see the results. People are a lot less satisfied.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think we've also seen that in the US market where a lot of people, for example, had challenges with some of the delivery services. Don't need to call out anyone specifically to disparage anyone, but certainly I also experienced that in my own family. And it really changed how we thought about like delivery versus curbside pickup and so forth. And I think we also see that grocers who really take ownership over their processes and the customer experience are likely to benefit, basically because they can not only manage the customer relationship more effectively and differentiate through the experience, but also just manage the quality of the experience for the customer versus relying on a third party partner and creating some intermediary there. Anyway, very interesting to see that as well. Thank you, Ian. Let's get into some Bloomreach data. Certainly the pandemic drove massive increases in online grocery shopping throughout 2020. Many consumers trying this out really for the first time. And of course, we saw the adoption of curbside pickup, as I've said, really drive conversion rates higher and average order sizes lower. As I kind of already mentioned with the home improvement dynamic, very similar, right? And so you can see that the sales there year over year really started to jump in Q2, peaking in a sense in Q3 and then in Q4, but maintaining a very high level throughout the year. Not on this slide, but also the importance of search, which we'll get to when we look at our most recent data here in a moment, just really jumps out at you when you look at the grocery data, the percentage of consumers leveraging search and the value of search to the bottom line, to sales. really jump out at you when you look at the grocery segment data in particular. I mentioned this already, but the numbers I think really are profound, right? You look at searches, curbside pickup up 305%. This is people looking for products that are available via curbside pickup or browsing to do the same, 305% increase. And then delivery, 1,129% increase in delivery, in terms of products that are available for delivery. So we've worked very closely, very fast early in the pandemic to support our clients implementing those kind of features on their websites. If you're in the grocery segment and you don't have these kinds of features powered in your search and merchandising solutions, the ability to surface this kind of information to the customer during their shopping experience, it really is critical. This is something that every consumer, the last thing you want to do is build a basket and go through a whole shopping experience and then realize that many of the products aren't available in the mode of fulfillment you're interested in as a consumer. I want to hand this back over to Ian here. Talk us through a little bit of the top search terms here, Ian.
Yeah, I think our search term related and sales related data really tells a very interesting story. So if we start on the left here, when we sort of have a word cloud of the top products people searched for when buying groceries online, we can see that COVID essentials were really dominating still the search terms. And it's not necessarily highlighted in the word cloud. But what we saw as the year progressed is that people started really searching for COVID related essentials. But more and more, as they got used to shopping online for their groceries, we see more normal related search terms like chicken and butter. And that really also becomes clear in the top products from search that were bought. So we hardly see any COVID essentials there in the top right. Only in Q1, the paper towels, but it's mainly like regular grocery products like beef, eggs, and milk. And you might be thinking, on the left in the word cloud, there's so many COVID essentials that are being searched for, yet they're not really being bought, is what we see in the top purchase data. And that story is really being told by in the top bottom right, with the top null searches. I mean, you can really see that people were looking for COVID essentials, but they weren't finding them. And I think that really indicates, out of stock.
Absolutely. There's also one other thing they weren't able to find in Q4, and that's chitterlings. But before I move on, I also want to highlight top product sales from search in Q4, e-gift cards. Also really jump out here, right? As people obviously look to keep it easy this past holiday. And even I was buying e-gift cards, even though I just dislike gift cards. It's a personal thing. But anyway, chitterlings. What are chitterlings? I live in the Northwest in the United States. I admit I was not that familiar with chitterlings, so I looked them up. Here's what is a chitterling. A chitterling is actually, and there's no nice way to say this, it's basically the pork intestine, very popular in the American South. It is actually considered a kind of a holiday dish. It's kind of a labor-intensive process to prepare, connected to the Black and African American community in large part, so-called soul food in particular in the American South, but also, popular beyond that. And also there's lots of other cultures that have very similar dishes, but that's what a chitterling is. You might also know them as chitlings. Anyway, little education for you. Let's move on to healthier food and healthier lifestyles, perhaps than chitterlings. And that is, what does what are some of the things we can see in terms of the New Year's resolutions playing out? Typical for us in the Western world, certainly, to use New Year's as a way to rededicate ourselves to health and fitness. And that's of course coming over off some of the indulgences of the holidays, no question. And certainly we've seen that throughout the year, self-care, fitness equipment, and so forth has trended high, partly because fitness has moved into the home, and also fitness apparel is obviously very comfortable, typically. But it is interesting to see how during the December to January time period, we saw really this jump in top products by search volume, with diets, beverages, food, fitness equipment, and apparel really jumping out, and self care. Interesting also to see that keto is the most searched for diet this year. High protein, right? Diets, well known to help you lose weight quickly. Debatable beyond that. I'm not going to pretend I'm a nutritionist, but also Mediterranean and vegetarian gaining in popularity. And I think we continue to see that the Mediterranean, so-called Mediterranean diet, and also the vegetarian trend and vegan trends continue to increase. We did see dumbbells with a very large year-over-year increase at plus 354%. Ironically, I bought dumbbells during that period of time as I look to round out my home gym as well. And we see that running shoes slightly declined as workouts moved indoors. And let's be honest, running, it's boring. I just want to provoke all those of you out there who love running. I'm not a runner. I'll chase a soccer ball all day long, but not go for a jog. Okay, let's look at some of the most recent results. Grocery e-commerce results. Again, you can see that overall sales in January plus 98.15% year over year. Traffic up 47% year over year. So you can see again where I talked about the search traffic and sales being incredibly important. Conversion rate up 60.48% year over year, and continuing to gain over December. Average order size down. I think that's expected in a sense. It's only down 1.37% month over month, but down 11.22% year over year. I think that's natural, in part because we're not trying to meet minimums for delivery. A lot of delivery charges have been dropped, and certainly curbside pickup changes the dynamic around average order size. So we continue to see pretty remarkable transition with the grocery segment, and these numbers are very consistent with a lot of what we saw in 2020. Very strong January. Let's talk a little bit about 2021 outlook for the grocery segment. I personally believe that many of the changes in consumer behaviors are going to persist as convenience, safety, and diet continue to drive online adoption. And when I say diet, I think people tend to not order as much junk food as they would if you're in the store and it's just so tempting, right? You're going down the aisles or you're in the checkout line and it's just so easy to throw the chips in the basket and so forth. Online, you're much more like driven to fill out like the specific things you want, and you're probably more conscientious and careful about what you're buying. So diet also, I think, has a bit of an impact here, and we tend to reduce the junk food and whatnot when we're more mindful shopping online. Selection and experience are clear differentiators in grocery, and personalization has been a critical way to drive that online. So the ability to drive great product recommendations, again, based on diet, based on occasion, based on what you bought before, streamlines and makes the whole experience more efficient, and also then enables you to position products in front of the consumer that they're more likely to actually want to buy. For example, if you know they're on a keto diet, you can recommend products that are going to work for them. They're more likely to convert on those versus surfacing a bunch of high carb things that they're like, no, 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 stop it. So certainly those are critical. Grocers are going to move e-commerce in-house as this has become a strategic differentiator, and competition heats up. And that competition is with other grocers, but it's also with CPG companies now going direct. And that's a trend that really kicked off in 2020. And I think that's going to continue to persist. Now that there's more momentum behind this, you're going to see consumer packaged goods companies selling beverages and food and so forth on down the line using a direct-to-consumer strategy. They're also selling through marketplaces. They're also selling in other channels, but certainly they didn't necessarily, grocers didn't necessarily embrace e-commerce, obviously, heading into 2020, with perhaps some exceptions like Ian was talking about in markets like the UK, where it's very mature. But this is going to move increasingly in-house. And finally, stores are going to be adapted to better serve contactless contactless concepts, curbside pickup, and delivery. I think we have to recognize that most grocery stores were not well set up for this heading into the pandemic. Some stores went dark for a period of time, just focused on curbside pickup and delivery. Now they are, in some cases, reorganizing their stores to make them more efficient for these processes, and I think that'll continue. And I think it'll also be in response to the fact that even post-pandemic, hopefully we're not too far away from that as vaccinations roll out. Some say late spring, some say early fall. Hopefully the new variants don't continue to persist, requiring lockdowns. But nonetheless, I think a lot in this segment, we're going to see a lot of these customer behaviors persist. And so changing your store formats and operations are really important. So let's move on, changing topics a little bit. Let's look at January 2021 search terms. Ian.
Yeah, I'll be going through last month's top search terms. On the right, you can see all the search term related data. And in the very right column, we can see January's top search terms. So that's last month. In the middle, December 2020, so the month before that. And the left column shows January 2020, so the year before that. And what we can instantly see in January 2021 is that the Christmas relating shopping isn't there anymore. Search terms like PlayStation 5, Harry Potter, or Christmas pajamas aren't there. And COVID essentials are still remaining in the top search terms, and masks really jump to the #1 spot. And we've been talking about it a lot in these calls, but luxury brands have been hit hard by COVID, and that's also something we see in this data. So where last year in January 2020, people were searching for luxury related products like Gucci, we don't see those brands return in January 2021.
Great, thank you, Ian. So that wraps up our Commerce Pulse call for January. As I mentioned, there's some additional resources that'll be available on our website, our e-commerce trends hub. You can see the URL there. You can certainly navigate through that on our website. We're always open to feedback, by the way, as well. So let us know what you think of these calls, how, what you're interested in seeing. We're starting to look at themes and segments like grocery, for example, that we did today. And so if there's something you want us to do a bit of a deep dive on, we're open to suggestions. We'd love to hear from you and what you think of these calls. Our next Commerce Pulse call will be March 4th, where we'll look back at February, and in particular, Valentine's Day. Yes, it's coming up. So get your act together. If you haven't started thinking about it, it's going to be on you very soon. So in March, we'll look back at what happened with Valentine's Day and what we can take away. And then again, of course, we're starting to look at annualizing the data around COVID, but that'll be coming in April, as we now can look and we fully lapped the COVID spike in e-commerce, and can really kind of take a look back and examine the whole year. So with that, I want to thank you very much for joining us here this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world. Be well, and here's to good business.